I am Elaine, 28 years old, and yesterday I became a millionaire. My Aunt Vivian left me everything, $2 million, her Victorian mansion, and her business shares. I was still processing my grief when they walked in. My parents, the same ones who abandoned me 15 years ago without a goodbye. They smiled like no time had passed. "We are your guardians," my mother announced sweetly. Then my lawyer entered the room, and their faces turned ghostly pale. I remember a time when my life was normal until I turned 13. I lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment with parents who seemed to love me. Dad worked as a sales manager at a local car dealership, and Mom taught third grade at the elementary school nearby. We were not rich, but we had enough. Friday movie nights with microwave popcorn, summer camping trips in our secondhand tent, Christmas mornings with hot chocolate and cinnamon rolls. But there were signs I was too young to recognize. The hushed arguments behind closed doors grew more frequent. The mysterious phone calls my father would take outside. The increasing number of overtime shifts that left him coming home smelling like cigarettes and alcohol instead of car polish. My father had always enjoyed an occasional poker game with friends. It seemed harmless at first. Then his friendly games evolved into weekend trips to Atlantic City. I overheard my mother crying one night, begging him to stop before we lost everything. He promised he would, but promises were like loose change to my father, easily spent and quickly forgotten. Mom changed too. Her bright smiles dimmed. She called in sick to work more often, spending days in bed with the curtains drawn. The refrigerator emptied, and when I asked about grocery shopping, she would snap at me to make do with what we had. Some days she would stare at me as if trying to memorize my face, then break into tears and lock herself in the bathroom. I tried to be perfect. I kept my grades up, cleaned the apartment without being asked, and never complained about wearing the same clothes until they were threadbare. I thought if I could just be good enough, everything would go back to normal. The day they left remains carved into my memory with painful clarity. It was a Tuesday in October, unusually cold for early fall. I woke up late because Mom had not come to remind me about school. The apartment felt different immediately. Too quiet. Too empty. Their bedroom door stood open, which was strange because Mom always kept it closed during her bad days. The closet doors gaped open too, half the hangers empty. Their dresser drawers were pulled out, only a few forgotten socks remaining. On the kitchen counter, I found a single-page note in my mother's handwriting. "Elaine, we cannot do this anymore. Your Aunt Vivian will take care of you. We are sorry." Just like that, 13 years were reduced to 16 words. I called my mother's cell phone repeatedly, each unanswered ring making my chest tighter. I tried my father's number, but it had already been disconnected. I searched for address books, emergency contacts, anything that might help me understand what was happening. I had met Aunt Vivian only twice before. She was my father's older sister, a stern businesswoman who lived in a different state. She never married, never had children, and according to my parents, never approved of their lifestyle. I had no way to contact her, and no idea if she even knew what my parents had done. I spent that night alone, afraid to tell anyone what had happened. What if they put me in foster care? What if my parents came back and I was gone? I survived on cereal and cried myself to sleep on the living room couch, waiting by the phone. On the second day, our landlord knocked, demanding the overdue rent. When I told him my parents were away, he eyed me suspiciously and mentioned something about calling social services. On the third day, I finally called my school counselor, who immediately involved Child Protective Services. The social worker who came, Miss Dawson, had kind eyes and a voice that reminded me of warm blankets. She made calls, pulled strings, and somehow located Aunt Vivian. "Your niece has been abandoned," I heard Miss Dawson say into the phone. "The alternatives are foster care or..." There was a long pause. I understand it is sudden, but she has no one else. Another pause. Tomorrow morning would be best. She cannot stay in the apartment alone another night. Aunt Vivian arrived the next day in a sleek black car that looked out of place in our neighborhood. She wore a charcoal gray suit and pearls, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun. Her expression when she saw me was not one of joy or even pity. It was determination mixed with resignation. "Pack what you can carry," she instructed, her voice clipped but not unkind. "The rest can be shipped later." The social workers handled the paperwork while I filled a single suitcase with clothes and stuffed my backpack with photo albums and my favorite books. I left behind my childhood bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling. The drive to Aunt Vivian's house took 3 hours. She did not speak much, except to ask if I was hungry or needed a bathroom break. I stared out the window, watching my world literally drive away in the rearview mirror. The legal guardianship process was complicated. There were court appearances, interviews with judges, more social workers, and psychological evaluations. Through it all, Aunt Vivian remained steadfast, if not particularly warm. She hired excellent lawyers and never once suggested sending me elsewhere, even when the process became lengthy and difficult. My parents never showed up to any hearing. The court tried to locate them to terminate their parental rights officially, but they seemed to have vanished completely. It was as if they had never existed. The abandonment left wounds that therapy could only partially heal. For years, I would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I had heard the front door open, that they had returned to explain it was all a terrible mistake. I wrote letters I never sent because I had no address to send them to. I scanned crowds in shopping malls, sure I had glimpsed my mother's profile or my father's distinctive walk. The therapist Aunt Vivian hired, Dr. Freeman, helped me understand that their leaving had nothing to do with me. Adults make adult decisions based on adult problems. She would say, "Children blame themselves because it gives them a sense of control. If it was your fault, you could fix it. But this was never yours to fix, Elaine." These were logical words that my heart refused to accept for many years. As time passed, my desperate search slowed. By my 18th birthday, I had stopped looking back every time someone called my name in public places. By 20, I had stopped drafting imaginary conversations for our reunion. By 25, I had accepted that the parents I knew were effectively gone forever. Through it all, Aunt Vivian remained not warm, not affectionate, but dependable. Rock solid. She never once broke a promise, never missed an appointment, never failed to provide what I needed. It was a different kind of love than what I had lost, but it was real. Moving into Aunt Vivian's home was like being transplanted to a foreign country. Her Victorian mansion sat on 2 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds with a wrought iron fence surrounding the property. My bedroom was larger than our entire former apartment, with heavy velvet curtains and an antique 4-poster bed that made me feel like I had stepped into a period drama. The rules were numerous and strictly enforced. Breakfast at 7 sharp, beds made before leaving for school. No shoes on the hardwood floors. Piano practice for 1 hour daily, whether I showed talent or not. Homework completed at the desk, not on beds or couches. Dinner conversation must include at least 1 current event topic and 1 personal achievement. No television on weeknights. I broke every rule in the first month, testing boundaries, perhaps unconsciously hoping to be sent away before I could be abandoned again. But Aunt Vivian never threatened to get rid of me. Instead, each infraction came with logical consequences. Late to breakfast meant no breakfast and a reminder that the kitchen closed at 7:30. Homework incomplete meant no activities until it was done. My weekend plans were canceled until assignments were finished to her satisfaction. Behind her rigid exterior, however, I occasionally glimpsed something unexpected. Like when she found me crying over a photo of my parents on their wedding day, and instead of scolding me for dwelling on the past, she silently handed me a handkerchief and sat beside me until the tears stopped. Or when I failed a math test despite studying for hours, and she hired a tutor rather than criticizing my intelligence. Aunt Vivian had built her fortune from a small inheritance, turning a local houseware store into a chain of 30 upscale home decor boutiques across 3 states. She worked long hours but always returned for dinner, often bringing paperwork to complete afterward. On weekends, she took me with her to business meetings, expecting me to observe and learn. "Watch how people negotiate," she would instruct. "Notice who speaks first, who concedes points, who maintains eye contact. Business is human psychology applied to commerce." Education was paramount in her value system. When the local public school proved inadequate, she enrolled me in Westfield Academy, a private school with small classes and high expectations. The transition was difficult. My former school had not prepared me for the academic rigor, and the other students came from wealthy families with very different life experiences. I struggled with the coursework initially, spending hours at my desk while trying to catch up. There were nights I wanted to give up, convinced I would never belong in this world of privilege and preparation. But Aunt Vivian would not accept surrender. "Your circumstances change through no action of your own," she told me one night when I was sobbing over geometry proofs. "But your response to those circumstances is entirely your choice. You can use this opportunity or waste it. The decision is yours, but I warn you, I do not invest in lost causes." It was not the warm comfort I wanted, but her blunt pragmatism somehow steadied me. I hired a peer tutor with my allowance and created study groups with classmates. By junior year, I had worked my way onto the honor roll. College applications brought new stress. I wanted to attend the state university where several friends were going, but Aunt Vivian pushed for more prestigious schools. "Your friends are not thinking of their futures," she said. "They are thinking of continuing their social lives. You need to think strategically about building your career." Our biggest argument erupted over this difference in vision. I accused her of trying to control my life. She countered that I was squandering potential out of fear of leaving my comfort zone. "I never asked to be your project," I shouted. "And I never asked to be your guardian," she replied coolly. "Yet here we are. I am trying to give you options your parents never had." That silenced me, and in the quiet that followed, she did something unprecedented. She told me about my father's childhood. "Your father was brilliant," she said softly. "He could solve complex math problems in his head, but our parents could not afford college. He worked at the gas station instead while I got the scholarship. He resented that for years. He started gambling to get rich quick since education was no longer an option. Your mother was the same, bright but limited by circumstances. I am trying to break that cycle for you." It was the first time she had spoken of my parents without judgment or anger. It gave me a window into their lives I had never had before, and it helped me understand her seemingly cold determination to push me academically. I applied to 7 schools and was accepted at 5. Ultimately, I chose Northwestern University to study business and marketing. Aunt Vivian paid the tuition without complaint, though I knew it was substantial. College brought new freedom and challenges. I joined clubs, made diverse friends, and discovered talents I never knew I possessed. I had a knack for design and marketing strategy that complemented the financial acumen Aunt Vivian had instilled in me. My summers were spent interning at her corporate office, learning every aspect of the business, from inventory management to vendor relations. Our relationship evolved during those college years. The physical distance somehow allowed emotional closeness to develop. Our Sunday phone calls became less formal, occasionally even including laughter. When I graduated with honors, The pride in her eyes was unmistakable, though she limited her public display of emotion to a firm handshake and a single nod. I moved back to her home after graduation, taking a position as marketing director for her company. We developed a comfortable routine, two independent women sharing space and occasional meals. I dated occasionally, though Aunt Vivian subtly discouraged any relationship that might distract from my career advancement. Then, 2 years ago, everything changed again. Aunt Vivian was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was poor from the beginning, but she approached her illness with the same discipline and determination she applied to everything else. "We all die," she said when I broke down after the diagnosis. "The only variables are when and how we use the time before that happens." She continued working as long as possible, transitioning responsibilities to me as her strength waned. Our roles reversed gradually. I became the one enforcing medication schedules, arranging doctor appointments, and ensuring proper nutrition. In her final months, a surprising softness emerged in Aunt Vivian. One evening, as I helped her into bed, she gripped my hand with unexpected strength. "You were the daughter I never allowed myself to have," she whispered. "Taking you in was the best decision of my life." She died peacefully in her sleep 8 months after the diagnosis. The funeral was small, attended primarily by business associates and a few distant relatives. I stood at the graveside, realizing she had become my true parent in all the ways that mattered. The grief was overwhelming at times. The house echoed with emptiness. I would catch myself listening for her footsteps or saving articles I thought might interest her. But I continued running the business as she had taught me, honoring her legacy through action rather than mere sentiment. I never expected to see my biological parents again until the day of the will reading, which changed everything. 3 weeks after the funeral, I received a formal letter from Harold Thompson, Aunt Vivian's attorney for over 30 years. The will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 cars in the morning at his downtown office. The letter mentioned that all interested parties would be present, but I assumed this meant only me, and perhaps some business partners or charitable organizations Vivian might have included. Thompson was a distinguished man in his 70s, with a full head of silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that he peered over rather than through. His office smelled of leather and old books, with dark wood paneling and a massive desk that had probably witnessed thousands of life-altering documents being signed. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a navy blue suit Aunt Vivian would have approved of. Thompson greeted me warmly, expressing condolences again before mentioning that we were waiting for a few others before beginning. I sat in one of the leather chairs, flipping through a business magazine without absorbing any of the content. The door opened, and I looked up, expecting to see one of Vivian's executives. Time seemed to stop. Standing in the doorway were two people I had convinced myself I might never see again: my parents. My father had aged dramatically. His once thick, dark hair was now thin and completely gray. Deep lines carved paths from his nose to his mouth, and his shoulders slumped forward as if carrying an invisible weight. He had gained at least 50 pounds. His once athletic frame was now soft and round. My mother looked even more altered. Her blonde hair was cut in a severe style that did not flatter her face, which had grown thin and angular. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and when she smiled, it did not reach them. She wore a dress that might have been fashionable a decade ago, and she clutched her purse with white-knuckled intensity. "Ela," my father said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "Look at you, all grown up." They moved toward me, and I found myself rising on unsteady legs. My mother reached for an embrace that I could not return. I stood stiffly as her arms encircled me, catching the scent of her perfume, both familiar and alien. "We have been trying to find you," my mother said, stepping back to examine me. "You look so much like your aunt now. So sophisticated." How did you know about today? I managed to ask, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. We saw the obituary in the newspaper, my father explained, attempting a sad smile. We have been keeping tabs on the family from afar. We knew you were with Vivian. Of course. Of course they knew where I was all these years and never once reached out. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Please sit down, Thompson interjected, gesturing to the chairs. We have one more person joining us before we begin. An older woman I recognized as Vivian's housekeeper, Mrs. Bentley, entered the room. She had worked for Aunt Vivian for over 20 years and had been kind to me in her reserved way. She nodded at me sympathetically before taking a seat near the window, as far from my parents as possible. As we waited for Thompson to begin, my parents attempted small talk that felt surreal. We live in Arizona now, my mother offered. The climate is better for your father's arthritis. I manage a convenience store, my father added. Nothing fancy, but it pays the bills. I nodded mechanically, unable to formulate responses. Inside, my emotions churned violently. Anger, confusion, hurt, and a treacherous flicker of longing all battled for dominance. Thompson cleared his throat and opened a thick folder. We are here to execute the last will and testament of Vivian Eleanor Hughes, he began formally. I will summarize the key provisions before providing copies to the relevant parties. My parents leaned forward slightly, an almost imperceptible movement that suddenly made their presence at this reading crystal clear. They had not come for closure or reconnection. They had come for money. Thompson adjusted his glasses. To my niece, Elaine Margaret Winters, I leave the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to the property at 347 Lakeview Drive, all its contents, and the surrounding 2 acres of land. My full ownership share of Hughes Home Collections, valued at approximately $12 million. All bank accounts, investment portfolios, and retirement funds totaling approximately $2 million in liquid assets. My personal effects, including jewelry, artwork, and automobiles, and all intellectual property related to my business ventures. The room fell silent. I had expected to inherit something, but the scope of the bequest was overwhelming. My father coughed lightly. Excuse me, Mr. Thompson. Is there anything else? Thompson looked at him over his glasses. There are some smaller bequests to longtime employees, he said, nodding toward Mrs. Bentley. And detailed instructions regarding charitable donations to be made annually from the business profits. But the bulk of the estate passes to Elaine, as I have stated. My mother's smile tightened. Well, this is quite a responsibility for someone so young, she said, patting my hand in a gesture that felt invasive rather than affectionate. Fortunately, as her parents, we are in a position to help. Thompson raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Legally speaking, my father added with forced casualness, since Elaine was a minor when Vivian took her in, and there was never any formal termination of our parental rights, we remain her legal guardians. We would be happy to assist with managing these assets until Elaine has more life experience. The panic that shot through me was visceral and immediate. After 15 years of silence, they wanted to control my inheritance. I opened my mouth to object, but Thompson spoke first. I believe there is some confusion about the legal status here, he said calmly. Perhaps we should continue this discussion tomorrow, when I can have all the relevant documentation prepared. Shall we say how? My parents exchanged a quick glance before my father nodded. That would be fine. We are staying at the Westmont Hotel downtown. We could meet for lunch before that, Elaine, to catch up properly. Before I could respond, Thompson stood. If you will excuse us, I need a few moments with Elaine to discuss some confidential matters related to her immediate responsibilities. My parents hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave without securing their position. We will see you tomorrow then, sweetheart, my mother said again, reaching for an embrace. I could not reciprocate. We have so much to talk about. As they collected their coats, my father handed me a business card with their cell phone numbers handwritten on the back. Call anytime, he said. Day or night. We have 15 years to make up for. The door had barely closed behind them when I collapsed back into my chair, hands shaking. They cannot really have any legal claim, can they? I asked Thompson. The attorney's expression was grim. I think you should prepare yourself for a difficult conversation tomorrow, he said. Your aunt anticipated this possibility, but I need time to organize her contingency plans. Mrs. Bentley approached before leaving, squeezing my shoulder gently. Your aunt was a wise woman, she said quietly. Trust that she would never leave you unprotected. I left the office in a daze, ignoring 3 calls from my mother before I even reached my car. The childhood fantasy of my parents' return had finally come true, but instead of joy, all I felt was dread. Despite my better judgment, I agreed to meet my parents for dinner that evening. Thompson had advised waiting until our meeting the following day, but a part of me needed answers only they could provide. I chose a public restaurant, an upscale Italian place Aunt Vivian had favored for business meetings. They were already seated when I arrived, my father standing to pull out my chair with exaggerated courtesy. My mother had applied fresh makeup and styled her hair, looking more like the woman in my memories. We ordered a bottle of Pinot Noir, my father said. I remember your mother always enjoyed it. I do not drink wine, I replied, requesting water instead. It was a small boundary to establish, but it felt important to make clear I was not the child they had left behind. Awkward small talk dominated the first 20 minutes. They asked about my education, my job, my friends. I provided minimal answers while studying their faces for glimpses of the parents I had once loved. We owe you an explanation, my mother finally said, reaching for my hand across the table. I kept mine firmly around my water glass. What we did was wrong. We were in a terrible place, my father continued. I had gambling debts that dangerous people were collecting on. Your mother was suffering from severe depression. We convinced ourselves you would be better off with Vivian. She had money, stability, my mother added. We had nothing to offer but dysfunction. You had yourselves, I said quietly. That is all I wanted. My father looked down at his plate. I got help for my addiction, he said. Been clean for 8 years now. You said you knew I was with Aunt Vivian, I said. How? They exchanged a glance before my father answered. We called social services about 6 months after we left, he said. They confirmed you were with family and doing well. We checked every few years after that. The idea that they had made these periodic inquiries while never attempting actual contact made my stomach turn. They had eased their consciences just enough to move on with their lives. We have regretted our decision every day, my mother insisted, a tear sliding down her cheek. Seeing you now, successful and beautiful, it breaks my heart that we missed watching you grow up. The waiter delivered our entree, creating a brief reprieve from the emotional tension. When he departed, my father shifted the conversation. Vivian did well by you, he said, twirling pasta on his fork. Better than we could have, and now she has left you set for life. The house alone must be worth $2 million in today's market, my mother added casually. Plus the business. It is overwhelming for someone your age. I have been helping run the business for years, I stated flatly. Of course you have, my father said soothingly. But there is a difference between helping and having full responsibility. The legal issues alone can be daunting, not to mention tax implications, my mother chimed in. Estate taxes can be crippling without proper guidance. I watched them carefully, noting how they alternated between emotional appeals and financial concerns. The pattern was becoming clear. We could help you, my father offered. We have had our struggles, but we have learned a lot about financial management the hard way. That is an interesting perspective from someone who abandoned his family over gambling debts, I observed. My father flinched but recovered quickly. Those experiences taught me valuable lessons. I know all the pitfalls to avoid now. My mother leaned forward. We have a modest condo in Phoenix with a second mortgage. Medical bills have been difficult. Your father's arthritis treatment is not fully covered by insurance. What exactly are you asking for? I said bluntly. They looked startled by my directness, another reminder that they were interacting with an adult, not the child they had left. We are not asking for anything, my father said unconvincingly. Though, if you wanted to help your parents get back on their feet, that would be a blessing, my mother added. Maybe pay off our mortgage. $70,000 would change our lives completely. Plus the medical bills, my father reminded her. Another $30,000 would clear those. I sat back, a cold clarity washing over me. So, $100,000 would solve your problems? They nodded eagerly. And what about my problems? I asked. The 15 years of wondering what I did wrong, the therapy bills, the nightmares? What is the price tag for those? My mother's tears flowed freely now. We know money cannot fix the emotional damage. We just want a chance to be a family again. A family that begins with a cash transaction, I noted. My father's expression hardened slightly. You have to understand our position. We made a terrible mistake. Yes, but Vivian was my sister. That fortune came from our family originally. Our parents left her the seed money to start her business while I got nothing. So, you feel entitled to it? I clarified. Not entitled, he backpedaled. Just included. We are your parents, Elaine. Blood means something. I thought of Aunt Vivian, who had shown me through actions rather than words what real parental love looked like. Yes, I agreed. Blood means something, but actions mean more. The rest of the dinner continued in this vein, swinging between emotional manipulation and financial hints. By dessert, they had mentioned several other debts and suggested I might want to add them to my team at the company with generous salaries. As we parted outside the restaurant, my mother hugged me again, whispering, "Think about what family really means, sweetheart. We all make mistakes." I drove home in a fog of confusion. Their story contained elements of truth. I remembered my mother's depression, my father's absences, but something felt rehearsed about their explanation, their convenient timing, their immediate focus on money. When I arrived home, there was a message on my answering machine from an unfamiliar number. Miss Winters, this is Sandra Kelly. I worked for your parents 15 years ago at First National Bank. I saw their names in connection with Vivian Hughes's obituary and felt compelled to reach out. Please call me before you make any agreements with them. There are things you should know. Sleep eluded me that night. I researched guardianship laws until my eyes burned. According to everything I could find, my parents' claims seemed tenuous at best. I had been an adult for years now, but why had Thompson seemed concerned? What documentation was he gathering? Around 3 in the morning, I found myself in Aunt Vivian's study, now mine, searching through her meticulously organized files. In a locked drawer I had never opened before, I found a folder labeled simply Winters. Inside was a history I had never known. I arrived at Thompson's office the following day, armed with the contents of Vivian's private file and my own sleepless research. My parents were already there, accompanied by a thin man with slicked back hair who introduced himself as Gerald Hoffman, their attorney. Just a precaution, my father explained with a tight smile. Legal matters can get complicated. Thompson greeted them cordially, but without warmth. His assistant brought in a cart loaded with several expandable files and a laptop. The atmosphere felt more like preparation for battle than a family discussion. Before we begin, Thompson said, I should clarify my role here. I am the executor of Vivian Hughes's estate and her personal attorney for the past 32 years. I also serve as Elaine's attorney through provisions made by Miss Hughes. Hoffman leaned forward. My clients are concerned about their daughter's sudden inheritance of such substantial assets, Hoffman said. As her legal guardians, they have a responsibility to ensure proper management of these resources. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. That is precisely what I wish to address today. There seems to be some confusion about legal status. He opened the first file. Let me clarify the history as documented. He removed several official-looking documents. When Elaine came into Vivian's care, temporary guardianship was established through family court. Social services documented multiple attempts to contact you both regarding permanent arrangements. My mother frowned. We were dealing with serious issues, moving frequently. Indeed, Thompson continued. After 6 months of failed contact attempts, the court scheduled a hearing regarding permanent guardianship. Notices were sent to your last known addresses and published in appropriate legal journals. My father shifted uncomfortably. We never received any notices. Interestingly, Thompson said, someone did contact the court claiming to represent you. He removed another document. A man named Louis Barker appeared with a signed affidavit allegedly from both of you, consenting to permanent guardianship transfer to Vivian Hughes. My parents exchanged a quick glance that confirmed my suspicions before my father spoke. We never authorized anyone to represent us. Those signatures must be forgeries. Thompson adjusted his glasses. Miss Hughes had similar concerns at the time. She hired a private investigator to locate you and confirm your intentions directly. He opened another file containing reports with photographs. The investigator documented Mr. Winters's activities at various casinos in Nevada during this period. He also photographed Mrs. Winters working as a cocktail waitress in the same establishments. When approached about Elaine's situation, you both explicitly confirmed your desire to terminate parental responsibilities. The color drained from my mother's face. Furthermore, Thompson continued relentlessly, the investigator documented a payment of $15,000 from Louis Barker to Mr. Winters the day after those affidavits were signed. That was an unrelated business transaction, my father protested weakly. Thompson ignored the interruption. Miss Hughes continued annual investigations to monitor your situations and determine if reconnection would be beneficial for Elaine. I have reports spanning 15 years documenting continued gambling activity, multiple evictions, job terminations, and several incidents involving collection agencies. He turned to another section. Particularly noteworthy are these documented attempts by Mrs. Winters to contact Elaine when she turned 18. He pushed a report toward me. 3 occasions when Mrs. Winters called Vivian's home but hung up without speaking. And this email sent to Elaine's college account, but never opened due to incorrect addressing. I stared at the evidence of these half-hearted attempts at contact, feeling a strange mix of pain and vindication. Most significantly, Thompson said, removing a sealed envelope, Vivian left this letter to be opened in exactly this circumstance. He handed it to me. The envelope bore my name in Aunt Vivian's precise handwriting. My dearest Elaine, I read aloud, my voice steadier than I expected. If you are reading this, it means I have passed on and your parents have suddenly reappeared in your life. This is not a coincidence. Over the years, I have documented multiple instances where they attempted to extract money from me using you as leverage. 6 months after you came to live with me, your father contacted me demanding $50,000 in exchange for not challenging the guardianship arrangement. I continued reading. I paid it against my better judgment, fearing a custody battle would traumatize you further. He returned 3 years later asking for more, claiming gambling debts had put his life in danger. I refused, and instead hired security for our home. I looked up briefly to see my father staring at the floor. When you turned 16, Your mother called claiming she had cancer and needed treatment money. My investigator confirmed this was untrue. When you received your college acceptance, they somehow obtained your email address and requested tuition money for a fresh start to rebuild their relationship with you, I read. I blocked these communications to protect you from their manipulation. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to continue. I have never told you these things because I wanted you to heal without additional betrayal. I hoped they would eventually seek help and become the parents you deserved. That has not happened. Now, they will likely attempt to access your inheritance through guilt, legal threats, or emotional manipulation. The room was completely silent as I turned to the final page. The guardianship was converted to legal adoption when you were 16, though I kept my surname and did not change yours, hoping someday reconciliation might be possible. You have been legally my daughter since then, and they have no claim to you or your inheritance. I had to pause, processing this revelation. Whatever you decide regarding a relationship with your biological parents must be your choice, but please protect yourself financially. Blood relation does not entitle anyone to the rewards of our hard work or justify their past neglect. Remember that family is built through consistent care and sacrifice, not DNA. I am proud of the woman you have become. Trust your judgment. All my love, Vivian. I carefully refolded the letter, emotions too complex to name flooding through me. Thompson cleared his throat. I have the adoption papers here, legally binding and properly executed through family court. I also have documentation of the multiple financial solicitations mentioned in the letter. He turned to my stunned parents. Additionally, Miss Hughes included a specific clause in her will that any legal challenge to these arrangements would result in the entire estate transferring to a charitable foundation for abandoned children. There would be nothing left for anyone to claim. Their attorney, looking increasingly uncomfortable, leaned over to whisper something to my father. We had no idea about any adoption, my father said, his voice hollow. We were told temporary guardianship only. By whom? Thompson asked pointedly. By social services, my mother insisted. All communications are documented in these files, Thompson countered, patting a thick folder, including your signed consent forms. My father's face darkened with anger. This is ridiculous. You paid us off and stole our daughter. I believe the security cameras in this office are recording that outburst, Thompson noted calmly, which directly contradicts your previous statement about forgery and could constitute an admission of accepting payment to transfer parental rights. My father stood abruptly. This is not over. We have rights, my father said. Dad, I said, the word feeling strange in my mouth after so many years. I found Vivian's file last night. I know about the other families, too. His expression faltered. What other families? The Petersons in Colorado, the Galinskas in Oregon, 3 other families you approached, claiming to be relatives of recently deceased wealthy individuals. It seems abandoning children and then trying to cash in on their inheritances has been your pattern for quite some time. My mother began to cry in earnest. Now, that is not true. We made mistakes with you, but we would never... I interrupted suddenly, exhausted by their performance. Vivian documented everything. She even has recordings of your phone calls demanding money. Did you really think she would leave me unprotected? My father's rage shifted to calculation. Listen, Elaine, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. We can work this out as a family. No need for attorneys and accusations. I think we are done here, I said, standing. Thompson, is there anything else legally required of me today? No, he answered. The estate transfers to you cleanly. Your parents have no legal standing to challenge the will or the adoption. Then I would like them to leave. Elaine, please, my mother begged. Just give us a chance to explain. 15 years, I said quietly. You had 15 years to explain. Instead, you waited until there was money involved. That tells me everything I need to know. Thompson pressed a button on his desk, and two security officers appeared at the door. These gentlemen will escort you out, he informed my parents. Any further contact with Miss Winters should be directed through my office. You cannot do this, my father shouted, his face contorting. She is our daughter. No, I corrected him. I was your daughter. Now I am Vivian's, and she taught me to recognize value beyond price tags. As security led them toward the elevator, my mother turned back. This is not who we raised you to be. We gave you life. And Vivian gave me everything else, I replied, including protection from people who see relationships as transactions. After they had gone, I collapsed into a chair, emotional exhaustion overtaking me. Thompson sat beside me rather than behind his imposing desk. You should know, he said gently, that I am also your godfather. Vivian asked me to accept that role when she adopted you. I promised her I would continue looking out for your interests after she was gone. This unexpected connection to Aunt Vivian brought fresh tears. Why did she never tell me about the adoption? She worried you might feel she was trying to replace your parents rather than simply protecting you legally, he explained. She wanted you to form your own opinions about family without her influence. She influenced me more than anyone, I admitted, just by being consistent when no one else was. Thompson nodded. We can file restraining orders if you wish. Given their financial motives and history, a judge would likely approve them. Yes, I decided. I think that would be best. As I left his office, I felt both drained and strangely liberated. The fantasy of my parents' return that had haunted me for years had finally played out. Nothing like my childhood dreams, but exactly as Aunt Vivian had anticipated. She had protected me one final time. Despite the restraining order filing in process, my parents appeared at Aunt Vivian's house, now my house, that evening. I saw their rental car pull into the driveway as I was preparing dinner. For a moment, I considered not answering the door, but a strange calm had settled over me since the meeting with Thompson. I needed this final confrontation. They rang the doorbell repeatedly until I opened the door, but remained on the threshold, blocking their entry. You cannot be here, I said firmly. A restraining order has been filed. We are still your parents, my father shouted, his earlier polish completely abandoned. You owe us the decency of a conversation without lawyers and security guards. I owe you nothing, I replied evenly. But I will give you 5 minutes to say whatever you came to say. Then you need to leave before I call the police. My mother pushed past me into the foyer, her eyes darting around to assess the home's interior. We just want to understand why you are being so cold, she said. We made a terrible mistake years ago, but we are trying to make amends now. By attempting to take control of my inheritance? I asked. That is an interesting approach to making amends. My father followed her inside despite my objection. That woman poisoned you against us, he spat. Vivian always resented me. She used you to hurt me. Vivian saved me, I corrected. She gave me stability, education, and self-respect. She taught me that love is shown through actions, not just words. We loved you, my mother insisted. We were sick. Depression is a real illness. Your father's gambling was an addiction. We needed help, not judgment. I was 13 years old, I reminded her, my voice finally breaking. I needed parents, not excuses. Do you have any idea what it was like to wake up and find you both gone? To wait by the phone for days, hoping you would call? To search the apartment for clues about where you had gone? My father looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I checked the mailbox every day for months, I continued, years of suppressed words finally pouring out. I kept thinking you would at least send a birthday card or Christmas present, some sign that you remembered I existed. Thoughts without actions are meaningless, I replied. Vivian never once told me she loved me, not a single time in 15 years. But she showed up every day for doctor appointments and school plays and nightmares and college applications. She built trust through consistency. "We are here now," my father said, his tone softening to the salesman's pitch I remembered from childhood. "We can build a relationship going forward, support each other as a family." "You are here now because Vivian died wealthy," I stated flatly. "If she had died poor, would you have bothered to find me?" Their silence was answer enough. "Thompson showed me the private investigator reports," I continued. "You knew where I was for 15 years. You chose not to contact me until there was financial incentive." "That is not fair," my mother protested. "We were ashamed. We did not know how to face you after what we had done." "Yet you found the courage immediately after learning about a multi-million-dollar inheritance," I observed. "Interesting timing." My father's face hardened again. "You have no idea what we have been through, living in poverty while my sister enjoyed wealth that should have been shared with our entire family." "Vivian built that wealth herself," I countered. "She worked 16-hour days for decades." "What exactly did you contribute to deserve a share?" "I am her brother," he shouted. "And your father?" "Biology is not an entitlement program," I said. "You cannot abandon your responsibilities for 15 years and then show up expecting rewards." My mother collapsed onto an antique chair, sobbing dramatically. "How did you become so heartless? This is not how we raised you." "You did not raise me," I reminded her. "You left before the job was done. Vivian finished it." Security lights flashed outside as a patrol car pulled into the driveway. I had asked Thompson to arrange periodic checks on the house, anticipating this confrontation. "That will be the police," I informed them. "You should leave now." "This is not over," my father threatened, grabbing my arm. "You think you have won, but we can make your life very difficult. We can tell stories about that woman that would tarnish her precious reputation." "Every threat you make is being recorded," I said, pointing to the security camera in the corner of the foyer. "Vivian installed them years ago after your first attempt to extort money from her." His face paled as he realized the implications. Anything he said or did now could potentially be used against him in court. "Come on," he muttered to my mother. "She is not worth the trouble." Those words, dismissing me as a mere inconvenience rather than a daughter. They had genuinely missed, confirmed everything. This had never been about reconciliation. It had always been about money. As they walked toward the door, my mother turned back. "You will regret this when you are alone with nothing but money to comfort you. Family is everything." "I agree," I said. "Vivian was my family. You were merely biological donors who failed to follow through on your commitments." After they left, I watched through the window as a police officer stopped them in the driveway. There was a brief, tense conversation before they drove away. I sank to the floor, adrenaline draining away. For 15 years I had carried a wound that never fully healed, hoping someday for an explanation that would make sense of their abandonment. Now I had my answer, and while it brought pain, it also brought clarity. Thompson called an hour later to check on me. "They have been officially served with the restraining order," he informed me. "They cannot legally come within 500 feet of you or contact you directly." "They said it was not over," I told him. "They could cause problems." "Empty threats," he assured me. "The documentation we have would make any legal challenge futile and potentially criminally liable for them." They were paid to give up custody, and then tried to extract more money repeatedly. No court would look favorably on that history. After we hung up, I wandered through Aunt Vivian's house, seeing it with new eyes. The formal dining room, where she had taught me proper table manners. The study, where we had reviewed business reports together. The garden, where she had occasionally joined me for morning coffee in comfortable silence. In her bedroom, which I had not entered since her death, I found a small wooden box on her nightstand that I had never noticed before. Inside was a collection of items that stunned me: report cards, school photos, newspaper clippings of academic awards I had received, even the program from my college graduation with my name highlighted. Beneath these mementos was another sealed envelope with my name on it. Unlike the formal letter Thompson had presented, this note was written on personal stationery. Elaine, I have never been skilled at expressing emotions. My generation and upbringing discouraged such displays, but as I face my mortality, I find myself regretting this limitation. So let me state plainly what should have been said years ago. I love you, not out of obligation or duty, but because of who you are. Your resilience, intelligence, and capacity for kindness despite early betrayal have been my life's greatest joy to witness. I did not give you life, but watching you live has been my privilege. The legal adoption papers were signed years ago, not for your protection, but for my peace of mind. I wanted the world to know you were my daughter in every way that matters. Be well, be wise, be happy, Mom. That final word, never spoken between us in life, broke something open inside me. I wept that night, not for the parents who had returned with selfish motives, but for the one who had never claimed the title yet, had earned it completely. 6 months have passed since that final confrontation with my biological parents. According to Thompson, they returned to Arizona after making one unsuccessful attempt to contact the local newspaper with revelations about Aunt Vivian. The editor, a longtime friend of Vivian's, had immediately called Thompson instead. The house feels like mine now. I have repainted some rooms, rearranged furniture, and added touches that reflect my own taste, while honoring Vivian's elegant sensibilities. The formal dining room now doubles as my home office, with large monitors sitting somewhat incongruously on the antique mahogany table where Vivian once hosted business dinners. The business continues to thrive under my leadership. I have implemented some modernization strategies Vivian had resisted, particularly in online marketing and inventory management. Our web presence has expanded significantly, and we have opened 2 new locations. The employees who knew and respected Vivian have transferred that loyalty to me, many expressing that they see her influence in my management style. Perhaps the most meaningful project has been establishing the Vivian Hughes Foundation for Family Reconnection. Using a portion of the inheritance, I created a nonprofit organization that supports children who have experienced abandonment or family separation. We provide therapy, educational opportunities, and transitional housing for young adults aging out of foster care. Through the foundation, I have met others with stories similar to mine. Some found reconciliation with their biological families. Others created chosen families from friends and mentors. Each journey is unique, but the common thread is the human need for stable, consistent relationships. My own therapy has continued, now focused less on the original abandonment and more on processing the complex emotions raised by my parents' return and true motivations. Dr. Freeman has helped me understand that closure sometimes comes in unexpected forms. The fantasy of reconciliation often serves a purpose in the healing process, she explained during a recent session, but the reality rarely matches the fantasy. Sometimes the greatest growth comes from accepting what cannot be fixed and building something new instead. 3 months ago, I received a letter from my mother. Unlike their previous communications, this one contained no requests or demands, just a simple acknowledgement of wrongdoing and an expression of regret that seemed, for once, genuine. I have not responded yet. I may never do so. The letter sits in my desk drawer, neither rejected nor embraced, while I consider what, if anything, I want from that connection. I have found unexpected comfort in relationships I had previously taken for granted. Mrs. Bentley, Vivian's housekeeper, still comes twice weekly. She has slowly shared stories about Vivian from before I arrived, painting a fuller picture of the woman who became my true mother. She was terrified when you first came. Mrs. Bentley confided recently. She had never wanted children, never thought she had the temperament for motherhood. The first night after you arrived, I found her in the kitchen at 3:00 in the morning, researching child development books online. These glimpses into Vivian's private concerns and efforts touch me deeply. She had taken on a responsibility she never sought, but fulfilled it with characteristic thoroughness and commitment. Thompson has become a regular presence in my life as well, joining me for dinner monthly and offering guidance on both business and personal matters. As my godfather, he has embraced a more avuncular role than his previously formal demeanor suggested possible. Vivian would be proud, he told me recently as we reviewed the Foundation's first quarterly report. Not just of your business acumen, but of your resilience. She worried constantly that your early experiences would leave you bitter or untrusting. Instead, you have channeled that experience into helping others. I have begun dating again after putting romance aside during Vivian's illness and the subsequent legal complications. Nothing serious yet, but I find myself approaching relationships with clearer boundaries and expectations. Vivian's example taught me that love should be demonstrated through consistent actions, not merely professed in convenient moments. The most profound change has been internal. The question that haunted me for 15 years, why did they leave me, no longer carries the same power. I understand now that their departure reflected their limitations, not my value. More importantly, I recognize that Vivian's decision to stay, to commit, to show up day after day was the more significant choice. Last weekend, I visited Vivian's grave with fresh flowers. The headstone is elegant black granite with simple lettering, exactly as she specified. I had a small addition made after the adoption revelation, the word mother engraved beneath her name. Standing there, I realized that family is not defined by blood or legal documents, but by the thousand small choices made daily. Who shows up? Who stays? Who tells difficult truths? Who creates safety rather than chaos? Vivian taught me through example that wealth is not measured solely in financial terms. True abundance comes from integrity, from commitments honored, from trust built slowly and maintained carefully. These are the values I carry forward, her most valuable bequest. The inheritance she left me extended far beyond property and investments. She gave me a model for living with dignity and purpose. She showed me that chosen family can be stronger than biological bonds, and she demonstrated that love need not be frequently spoken to be deeply felt. I will never know if my biological parents truly regret their actions or simply regret losing access to financial resources. In the end, their motivations matter less than I once thought. What matters is the life I choose to build moving forward, the relationships I nurture, and the legacy I create. Have you ever had to redefine your understanding of family? Do you believe that blood connections automatically deserve forgiveness, or should relationships be earned through consistent care and respect? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to our channel for more real-life experiences. And if you know someone struggling with family issues who might find comfort in this journey, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the family we choose brings more healing than the family we are born into.